Thank you, everybody, and good morning. And apologies for the slightly late start. I think we're nearly 5 minutes late. Good morning. Before I formally start the meeting, I will go through the normal preamble. And this allows us to have this hearing under the 2003 Licensing Act and the Licensing Act Hearing Regulations 2005, which allow councils to make their own arrangements for licensing subcommittees to hearing matters connection with premises licenses. I'll now go to each subcommittee member in turn to confirm that they can hear and be heard. So if you could confirm that you can hear me, and I will in turn respond that I can hear you. Councillor Paul Andrews.
Good morning, Chairman, and good morning all. Yes, I can hear and see you clearly.
Yes, and I can see and hear you too. Thank you very much. And Councillor Tony Johnson.
I can see and hear you clearly, Chairman.
Thank you very much, and good morning to you as well, Councillor Johnson. Then I'd also like to request that the officers here can, who will be present throughout the meeting, can hear and be heard. Emma Bowell from the Licensing Department.
Good morning, Chair. I can hear and see you.
And I can hear you also, Emma. Good morning. Sarah Buffery, who's now committee clerk, and welcome to your first subcommittee clerking. Sarah?
Good morning, Chair. Yes, I can hear and see you fine.
Thank you, and I can see and hear you also. Then we have Alice McAlpine, who's the legal advisor to the committee. Alice, you're muted.
Good morning, Chair. I can see and hear you. I'm hoping you can now hear me.
Indeed, we can. Good morning to you, Alice. And Jen Priest, who is the technical support officer for this meeting.
Good morning, Chair. I can hear and see you. Thank you.
And I can hear you as well. Good morning to you, Jen. I'd like to welcome everybody to today's meeting. The council is video and audio streaming this meeting live on the internet and making a recording. This recording forms part of the public record of the meeting and will be available later on the council's website. Please note that it's the council's preference that where you are able to do so, you have your video switched on as well as your audio. Now, if I disappear at some point during the proceedings, because I am having somewhat broadband issues this morning, I will come back as audio only. Please note that please remember that what you say and do in this meeting has a global reach, and your words and actions should be chosen carefully. Can I also remind members to ensure that they're wearing their headsets where possible? I can't because it's broken, but never mind. I'm sure we'll overcome that. This ensures that we can hear and see each other as well as possible. There are some additional points that members and officers should be aware of. As part of our meeting etiquette, all microphones apart from mine will be placed on mute at the start and during the meeting. I will then run through the agenda in the customary way. When you wish to speak, please use the virtual hand, which is somewhere on the bottom of your Zoom toolbar, and I will then invite you to speak as you raise your hands. Please do not raise your physical hands, as I don't want to miss anybody who may wish to speak at the time. Please also note that the chat facility has been switched off to ensure that members' contributions can be offered through the spoken voice and for the public record. Please also ensure that all mobile devices are switched to mute to make sure they don't interfere with our proceedings. If any attendee loses connection, the meeting will be paused as to ascertain if the connection can be restored quickly. If it is not possible to recover the connection within a reasonable amount of time, the meeting will continue as long as a quorum of committee members remains and you can hear and be heard. And if you plan to leave the meeting, can you please let me know beforehand? Are there any questions from members before we proceed? Good, no questions. So I'll now formally open the meeting and go to the agenda. Item 1 is our agenda. On our agenda is apologies for absence. Sarah.
There are no apologies this morning, Chair.
Thank you, Sarah. So that being the case, there are no named substitutes. Item 3 is the declarations of interest. Are there any members who have a schedule 1, schedule 2 or other interests to declare on the item of this agenda today? Councillor Johnson, Councillor Andrews. No, and neither do I. So that leaves us on to item 4, which is to hear the application to grant a premises license in respect of JJ and Little Dots at 14 Bridge Street, Hereford, HR 49DF, heard under the Licensing Act 2003. The order of speakers will be Emma will give the presentation on behalf of the licensing authority, who will outline the application. Then the applicant or both of you may then speak. Was the applicant's agent, which is Mr. Semper, and Mrs. Gledhill. Ms. Gledhill, I think, hopefully is acceptable. Will also be given the opportunity to speak at that time. There will then be questions from the members present, and we'll also take into account the public representation we've had on this item. Then there will be an adjournment where the subcommittee members will go off with their legal advisor and clerk to discuss the meeting. Then we'll return at a time I will specify later. So without any further ado, we will move on to the presentation from the licensing department. Emma.
Thank you, Chair. As the Chair rightly said, this is an application to consider a grant of a premises licence at JJ and Little Dots, 14 Bridge Street, Hereford. There are a number of recommendations and alternative options that are set out in this report, and the reason for these is that it ensures compliance with the Licensing Act 2003. The application for grant of a premise licence has received a relevant representation and is therefore brought before the committee today for determination. Herefordshire Council Statement of Licensing Policy 2020 to 2025 states all representations must be relevant. For example, they must be about the likely effect of the grant of the application. This followed paragraph 8.57 in the section 182 guidance, which uses the same wording. So the details of the application are as follows. The applicant is JJ and Little Dots Limited, with the agent being the licensing guide. Application was received on the 12th of August, and the 28-day consultation started on the 13th of August, and then concluded on the 29th of September, 28 days later. The application, which can be found at Appendix 1, requests the grant of a premise licence to allow the following licensable activities. Late night refreshment, which is indoors, 11 p.m. until 1 a.m. on Valentine's Day, Christmas Eve, New Year's Eve, bank holidays and Sunday preceding bank holidays only, and the sale of supply of alcohol from consumption on and off the premises from 9 a.m. until 10 p.m. daily. Also, till 1 a.m. on Valentine's Day, Christmas Eve, New Year's Eve, bank holidays and Sunday preceding bank holidays. Under the Live Music Act of 2012 as amended, an alcohol licensed premises can have live and or recorded music from 8 a.m. until 11 p.m. for up to 500 people, without the need for these activities to be on a licence. A set of conditions to promote the licensing objectives has been proposed by the applicant and will form part of the licence if granted and can be found at Appendix 2. No representations were received from any of the responsible authorities. One relevant representation has been received from a member of the public that the licensing authority has accepted as being relevant and can be found at Appendix 3. In response to the public representation, the applicant and applicant's agent are willing to negotiate the licensable activities timing, and the proposal can be found at Appendix 4. Any decision may have an impact on the local community. There are environmental impacts and equality duties that are set out in this report. There are no financial implications to the council at this time. There are a number of legal implications that are set out in this report that you should be aware of, and your legal advisor can advise you further on these. There is a right of appeal under Schedule 5 of the Licensing Act. Appeals should be made to Magistrates Court and must be made within 21 days beginning with the day on which the appellant was notified by the authority of the decision being appealed against. There is little risk associated with this, as the legislation allows for that right of appeal at Magistrates Court. All responsible authorities and members of the public living within Herefordshire have been consulted. Appendices 1 to 4 can be found at the back of this report, and there has been some supplemental information published after the report, which you've all been made aware of. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Emma. You'll note that Mr. Semper has very kindly provided a list of other licensed premises in the immediate area. Emma, could you remind us, please, of the proximity of the nearest residences to these licensed premises, please?
Yes, of course. So you have on Bridge Street, the Black Lion, the Den, what is going to be called a restaurant. You have a flat above there. You've also got the flat behind, which I believe is Riverside Court.
Yeah.
And then you obviously got some over the bridge, which is just behind the Saracen's Head.
Okay, thank you very much for that clarification. Members, any questions for the licensing officer at this stage? Okay. I believe, Mr. Semper, you're doing the honours this morning.
Yes, that's right, sir. Good morning. How are you?
Good morning. Good, thank you.
Okay. Well, good morning, everybody. Yeah, it's still morning. This is an application for a new premises license for a premises that has not been licensed before. The applicant is JJ Little Dots, which is an established business, being a successful family-friendly cafe and bakery that is now currently open 7 days a week, selling freshly baked breads, pastries and cakes. They'd also like to offer alcohol with their menu going forwards. That's why we're all here. Now, the essential thing that must be recognised that this is a new application, and as such, I'm sure your legal advisor will no doubt advise you that this application stands and should be judged on its own facts and merits. You must therefore ask yourself, does the proposed operating schedule promote the licensing objectives? Clearly, our position is that it does, highly effectively. So much so, in fact, that none of the responsible authorities have raised any representation or objection to this application. Now, in our submission, they are therefore satisfied that this operating schedule promotes the licensing objectives. It follows that we say to you, too, that you should be so satisfied. Now, we have but one representation from a Mrs. O'Byrne, who lives above. She maintains that this is very much a residential area and she needs to be protected from the inevitable disorder that the grant of this premises license will bring. She has sought and obtained reassurances from the applicant, but still worries about the terminal hour and late night disturbances that will necessarily ensue. We've tried ourselves and also kindly via Ms. Bell from the licensing department to engage with Mrs. O'Byrne, but to date we've received no reply whatsoever, so hence this hearing today. Okay, so taking each of Ms. O'Byrne's points in turn. One, you will find in the bundle a précis of the other licensed premises within the environs of Bridge Street that the chair's already referred to. So the claim that Bridge Street is very much a residential area cannot be right, as there are 10 licensed premises already in that locality. Two, the hours sought are not excessive, and in fact represent the least hours available to any of the licensed premises listed on the list provided. And three, we must challenge the assumption that, were you to grant this license, that disorder is inevitable. That is a sweeping generalization based upon fear and speculation and does not recognize whatsoever the nature and style of the business run by Ms. Gledhill. Now, we are not insensitive to the issues raised by Mrs. O'Byrne, which are principally centered around public nuisance. Therefore, we contact Mrs. O'Byrne at the earliest opportunity and offer to trim any seasonal variations, i.e. a terminal hour at Christmas, New Year and bank holidays of 1 o'clock, which is fairly standard fare and present on the other licenses, we believe, in Bridge Street from the application. So as we received no reply to our offer of a concession, we assumed that that offer was dismissed. Now, JJ Little Dots is to be a very different operation to its neighbours. Being primarily a family-friendly operation, it's even got its own inbuilt play area. And it carries no regulated entertainment and no outside area. It is small in size and primarily a dining-only operation. As it has not yet traded in alcohol, the representative's concerns in this respect are based on fear and speculation of what might happen. And there is absolutely no evidence before you that it is likely or that it will. And the stated case of Thwaite specifically excludes speculation from your deliberations here today in any event. We therefore respectfully ask you to grant this modest application, mindful that we have heard and acted upon the representations, that we have received no representations upon which to act upon. So thank you very much indeed. That's basically the number of it, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Semper. Ms. Cleto, have you anything to add at this point?
It's just that we're family friendly focused and we just want to be able to offer that glass of beer or wine with parents and their meal whilst their little ones play.
Okay, thank you for that. One thing that concerns me to do with our licensing objectives, one of the primary one in my view is the protection of children from harm. What measures do you propose to put in place to ensure that children are protected from harm in your environment? Mr. Semper, you're muted.
Sorry, thank you. Clearly, we have all the protections expected of us by the model pool of conditions employed by Herefordshire Council around Challenge 25. But you must recognise, sorry, I'd invite you to recognise, that's a better way of putting it, the nature of this family-friendly restaurant. It has a zero footprint with the responsible authorities. The police have never, ever been called there, and nor have any of the others. This is not somewhere where people are going to get horrendously drunk and abuse their children. So to the extent that, well, to any extent, but let alone to the extent that they need protection. So thank you.
Could I just ask our legal advisor, the revised section 182 guidance allows us to take into consideration the likelihood of any effect. Is that correct?
That is correct, but it would still need to be evidence-based, Chair.
I'm struggling with that a little. The likelihood and the evidence-based seem to contradict each other.
This is the problem between the guidance and case law, Chair.
Understood. Okay. Members, any further questions for Mr. Semper or Ms. Gledhill or Alice, Mrs. McAlpine? Councillor Johnson.
Thank you, Chairman. If I might ask the applicant's agent, licensing from 9 o'clock in the morning does seem to be extraordinarily early for a family-friendly business whose prime occupation is the production and sale of baked goods, fine foods. I find it difficult to understand why you would even want to sell alcohol at 9 o'clock in the morning.
You know what, sir, that's a really good point. And actually, if you look at the comments on the Hereford Times newspaper article on this very application, you'll see that replicated. The problem is that when you make the application, if you tick both on sales and off sales, it looks as if... Mr.
Semper, could I just interrupt you? I mean, the Hereford Times, I'm sure my legal representative is about to say that...
So your legal representative was struggling to get her hands up. Can we be... I have been very careful to advise my committee members they should have no regard to any press that has been around this application. So I would be grateful if you would respect that. This is about what information has been presented in front of this committee, not what is reported in the press, to be fair.
And I must say it is extremely difficult for any of us who use Facebook to insulate ourselves from this kind of thing, because to be honest, I'm in the verge of switching Facebook off almost totally by some of the nonsense that comes through on that medium. But okay. if we could keep to the facts of the application, please, Mr. Semper.
Certainly. Okay, the application is for on sales and off sales. The premises can open at 9 o'clock in the morning and make off sales. Say, for example, if I'd been in there the previous evening and particularly enjoyed a bottle of wine with my wife, I could swing by the following morning at 9 o'clock in the morning and buy it as an off sale. and that is the way that the license is constructed. When you make the application, you apply for both on sales and off sales at the same time with only one set of hours. Okay, so it'll be off sales between 9 and 11, for example, like you could do at Tesco's or any off licensed premises. And then beyond that, then you're going to start your lunchtime menu and maybe offer wine if somebody wanted it with it.
Thank you. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Councillor Johnson, Mr. Semper. Councillor Andrews, anything to add?
Only thank you, Chair. Only regarding the play area in the CAF. Obviously, which is good to see, family, but a play area. So regarding the child and protection of children, alcohol and children, yes, don't get me wrong. I can't say somebody sat there having a meal and having a drink of wine, also children and playing in a safe pen. But on the other side, we've got to protect the rights of we've got to uphold the licensing objectives. So I'm just asking about the play area. That's basically it.
And that's another really fair question. I mean, you know, many pubs have play areas, some inbuilt, some outside. Okay, this one happens to be inside. All right, and it's also excluded from the consumption area and also the licensable area. So, you know, the possibility of parents getting into that play area and drinking amongst children playing is precluded by within the terms of the licensor. But it's a good point, and we take it. Thank you.
Are there any other points from anybody? Ms. Gledhill, Mr. Semper, Mr. Councillor Johnson, Councillor Andrews. Very well. I'll draw this section to a close. The committee will withdraw to consider the decision on this. It is, I think we might have to have some discussion on it. So I will say we will reconvene at 12:15. We'll back here, and if we're any later, then I'll let the clerks know to inform you. So we will come back here at 12:15. Members and legal and clerk will see you. Welcome back, everybody. I will now go to each member and check that they can hear and be heard. Councillor Paul Andrews.
Hello again, Chair. Yes, I can hear you clearly and see you clearly.
I can hear you too. Councillor Tony Johnson.
Thank you, Chairman. I can see and hear you clearly.
And I can see and hear you also. We've had considerable discussion about this application, taking into account our licensing objectives and everything else. So I will read the decision and then I'll make a couple of general comments as well. As far as this application is concerned, the committee has heard from our licensing department in the form of Emma Bowell, the applicant and her agent, Mr. Semper. We've also taken into consideration the representation from members of the public. Now, as a general point, the committee is caught between the revised Section 182 guidance that's come down to the 2003 Act and which allows the likely impact of a license being granted versus case law, which is governed usually by Daniel Thwaites versus Wirral Borough Council from 2008, which stipulates that any conditions imposed on a license must be evidence-based. Now, you'll see from that any licensing committee around the country is caught between a rock and a hard place as far as the imposition of conditions to a license is concerned. So in terms of imposing any additional conditions to this application, as there are no evidence or there's no evidence to suggest that new conditions are necessary, we have decided, the committee is minded to grant this application as requested. Now, we have mentioned our licensing objectives of the protection of children from harm and the prevention of public nuisance as two of our very, very prominent licensing objectives. And we trust that the applicant will take those duties under the Licensing Act extremely seriously. And we hope that you will be able to be good neighbours to the members of the public that live around you. Now, on a general point, not related to this application whatsoever, there is included in the 2003 Act the possibility for members of the public to launch reviews against licensing premises where they think conditions are being breached. And if there are any licensed premises within the county that members of the public feel are being breached, they should contact our licensing department as soon as possible so that that review process can be started and any misbehaviour, let's say, on the part of licensees can be brought before this committee. That is the conclusion of today's meeting. Can I ask that the live stream be stopped, and I hope you all have a very good day.